chat. I'm just gonna dive right in with this introduction, which I'll paraphrase a bit because you have quite the impressive resume here. But we're really delighted to be able to work with you. Maor Elbaz-Starinsky was appointed the Consul General of Israel in Miami, which one of the things you're going to need to talk about the fact that that we're now covered by Miami. But he is working on building partnerships and coalitions for Israel with the people and governments of Florida, Kansas, Missouri, and Puerto Rico. And I have not been in Missouri for a very long time, but we don't usually get combined with Florida, Kansas, and Puerto Rico. For the last 4 years, Maor headed the training departments of the Foreign Ministry and was responsible for the professional training, mid-career enrichment, and job retraining for the ministry's 1,200 employees. Recognized by the ministry with an award of excellence, he developed a new process for recruiting and training the prestigious diplomat cadet class each year. He's a member of the Strategic Affairs Division and represented Israel at various international forums and conferences, and in particular was involved in discussions related to arms control at international organizations, and also served as a policy advisor to the Israeli delegation to the European Union and NATO, and was responsible for regional strategic security and NATO-related issues. I can keep going on and on. I think very interestingly that your first posting was for the Embassy of Israel in Nairobi. And I'm sure you have a lot of fascinating stories from there also, but probably some really interesting stories that are developing now that you're working in the Midwest in the United States also. So I'm just gonna pass the floor over to you. But Maor, I guess just to get started, to share with everyone a little bit more about the work that you're doing, what the relationship is between the consulate and us who are in Missouri, and some of your vision for what you're hoping to accomplish while at this posting.
Well, thank you, Rory. I just unmuted myself, which I'm not used to do at home because I didn't mention the most important thing. I'm a father for 5 kids, and so usually I am unmuted at home. I am muted at home. I'm not used to being unmuted. And I keep saying that I think the most important thing in any resume is missing who are your parents, because we are the from the flesh and bone of our parents, and this is probably the most important thing in our, or at least in my character. So I'm also the father of Yitzhak and Yafra from Eilat in Israel, and I'm very proud to represent the state of Israel as well as my parents here in Miami. So thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to be here with you today, to see all this very nice and pleasant faces, and I really hope to do it in person in the near future. First of all, I will try to answer your question about how come Miami covers out of all the states covers Missouri or the Midwest. Well, given that we have 8 consulates across the U.S. and given that the U.S. has 50 states, each one of these states has the economic and political and social importance as almost any other, or sometimes more than any other country, independent countries in the world where we have embassies. So the rationale in the ministry says that all the 50 states has to be covered somehow by any of our 8 consulates. Now it does make sense, and it used to be that Missouri would be covered by Chicago, which is 5 hours driving away. But given that Chicago already has 9 other states, they thought about, okay, who could we assign Missouri and Kansas with? Now, sometimes the rationale is, okay, let's choose a geographic region. Boston will cover New England, Chicago will cover the Midwest, Houston will cover Southern US, but there is not quite a state like Florida. Florida is the exception. So they just chose 2 random states that are kind of similar in their characteristic, Missouri and Kansas, and they were allocated to us, and we are very happy and we are very pleased and we are very proud to represent Israel in these 2 wonderful states. And I'm not just saying it because because I'm a diplomat, also because I'm a diplomat, but also because I've witnessed in my own eyes just last month, was it last month? A month and a half ago, when I came over to St. Louis and to Jefferson City, and we met Rory, and you hosted us with just a beautiful, wonderful event, wonderful dinner, and I witnessed the huge potential and the enormous opportunities that Israel and Missouri has, well, already is implemented, or the opportunities that are already being harnessed and implemented, but also opportunities that are lying ahead to further develop their relationship on all levels. And when I'm saying all levels, maybe that's a window into how the consulate, or how I see the work of the consulates here in the US. Our bread and butter, the bread and butter of any diplomatic representation out of the 108, maybe now 109 with the Bahrain embassy that we just opened last week. So the bread and butter is the political work. We, the Israeli diplomats, are expected of, and usually we are successful in being one phone call away from the decision takers in any political entity, be it a state, be it a country, be it a local municipality, be it a professional body such as police, military forces, National Guard, etc., etc. We, the heads of the mission usually, but the whole staff should be able to analyze what's going on politically, should be able to give Israel insights and forecasts about where this state or country is going. We should be able to identify the next generation's leaders and communicate with them and interact with them now. So when they're in the positions where they have a lot of influence, they were already converted by us to like and to be affiliated with Israel. One very good example for that is the Prime Minister of India, who was almost an exile in his Gujarat state within India, but our former ambassador in India, maintained very good relationship with him. And now we all know where Prime Minister Modi is, and how powerful he is, and how the relationship with Israel are of strategic importance to both Israel and India. So this is really our bread and butter. We need to know, we need to be in touch with the governor, with the governor's staff, with all the Congress people of the state, and we will maybe touch the Congress people of Missouri later on in this conversation. Of course, the senators on the local level, and so on and so forth. On top of that, of course, there are many other levels or domains of or sectors of cooperation. Probably the most important one, or the most prominent one, is the economic level, or the economic branch of our activities. If in recent years we used to say that the economic work of a consulate or of an embassy was just to support the political work. I mean, this political work has its own floor, and the political and the economic work just comes as another pillar to support this political work, assuming, usually it was true, that the stronger the economic relationship, then the stronger the political relationship between the two entities are. This is still very valid, but the economic work almost gained life of itself, a vector of itself. We call it now economic diplomacy. It's really a branch of diplomacy that lies proudly next to the political diplomacy that we are, of course, executing and are very committed to. So we are very, very committed to promoting the economic relationship between the two, between the state of Missouri, but of course also with the other states, and between the state of Israel. And again, we saw it, and I will elaborate in just a few minutes about the other potential. But we saw how big is the potential, how many opportunities there are, and we are trying our utmost to promote both Israeli companies who would like to do business in Missouri, with the state, with other companies, and of course, companies from Missouri or government offices from Missouri who would like to do business with Israeli companies. And now I would say two very important things. First of all, and this would be, we have a phrase in Hebrew. I'm not sure it applies also in English. Something that should serve as a candle to our foot. Something that we should always remember. Israel, the state of Israel, is an asset. The state of Israel is an asset for the US. The state of Israel is an asset for Missouri, for the Jewish community. And I would even say that the state of Israel is an asset to the world. There are conflicts, there are political conflicts, there is internal political conflict or disputes, there are external threats and challenges. We have the Palestinian issue, we have the Iranian issue, we have Hezbollah, we have Hamas, and we have Syria, somebody called us a villa in the jungle. Yeah, we are in a villa in the jungle. But this villa is a wonderful villa. This villa is not, it's more than a villa, it's a beacon that shines the world with values, with principles, and with a lot of genius. And this is something that we should remember, because we are often, tomorrow I'm going to give a lecture in a university here in Southern Florida. And I expect to be challenged with difficult questions. Well, it's questions, I don't even call it difficult. That's my work. My father was working very hard. I'm not working hard. Okay, I'm not working with a fit work. I'm talking. So what about the Palestinians? And what about Iran? What about, we should remember that there are very, very, very few countries in the world that don't have any conflicts whatsoever, and there are very countries in the world that are so successful despite the threats and challenges that they have. I remember when I was in the UN a couple of years ago, I went on a taxi ride to the airport or something like that, and the driver was of Indian origin. And he asked me, and he realized I was Israeli, maybe it was my accent, maybe I told him, I don't remember. And he asked me, well, you're from Israel, why don't you solve your conflict with the Palestinians? I asked him, well, why don't you solve your conflict with Pakistan or Kashmir? He says, oh, you don't talk about our conflict with Pakistan, you don't know anything about that. And that's something that we need to remember. Everybody thinks they know anything about the Palestinian conflict. But no, nobody knows anything about the Palestinian conflict, or very, very few people who live in it are differing on facts and pieces of the history. So we need to remember Israel is an asset. Israel, almost all of us who are now participating on this Zoom are using technology that was invented or developed or derived from Israel. And with all the BDS movement, with all the Ben and Jerry's movements, very, very, very few can actually boycott Israel without sustaining, without being disconnected from the modern life. I would say that. And another thing that I would like to raise now, and just another example for the opportunities that we have, is that the governor of Missouri is going to go to Israel on a visit. Political and leading a business delegation in just 2 months, in the beginning of December. And with all due respect to Israel, businessmen and I appreciate that, businessmen and companies, they are looking at the end of the day at their Excel sheet at the profit line. Is it in profit? Is this profit enough, or are we in debt? Nobody goes to Israel, or business people don't go to Israel, or companies don't go to Israel because of my nice eyes or because of the views. They go, tourists go there to experience to get some inspiration. And Israel is flooded, and I can tell you here in Miami, we are flooded with requests from business people and companies. Now with the coronavirus, they need to get permission to go to Israel. That's why we are flooded. Otherwise, they would not even go through us. We are flooded with people and companies that want to go to Israel to do business, to explore the opportunities, because Israel has so much to give to the world. And this is something that we are really engaged with here at the consulate. We need to analyze what's going on in the respective countries, to identify the different sectors, to identify the added value that we have in Israel. Just today, I had a few talks, and yesterday a few talks with Israel that were also derived from my visit to Missouri last month. How can we promote all the leads? We have many leads. Now we need to take these leads and do something with it, follow this lead. How do we make the connection? I had a conversation with Startup Nation Central, which is an NGO that promotes innovation, and with the Innovation Institute, and with the Innovation Authority, and with the Expert Institute, and with our innovation department, because there are so many leads, with BioSTL, with WashU, with the Department for Economic Development in the Governor's Office. We've identified agriculture and water and cyber and fintech and automotive and aviation and some other sectors that are worthy of promoting between Israel and Missouri. And this is something that we're working very hard on. Of course, we are also engaged in other levels of activities. I would mention only one, but we can then elaborate if you want on the others. And that's not looking after, that's a bit patronizing, but being in touch with our very, very dear Jewish community, with a very dear Jewish community. The Jewish communities, I would say communities and not community, because it's very heterogeneous. The Jewish communities around, especially around the US, but of course around the world, are a big source for support for the state of Israel. We, of course, do not forget that in the end of the day, they are our true brothers and sisters. And one of the goals that I've set to myself is to be in touch with all these communities, to support them as much as I can, support them in festive events, but support them also in fighting antisemitism and Holocaust Remembrance events. So there is a lot yet that we can be, that we are striving to do. I've been in touch with the presidents of the federation in both, of course, here in Southern Florida, but of course also in St. Louis, in Kansas City, and we will pursue all kinds of activities with the Jewish communities. And you know, Rory, I avail myself to you as the State of Israel representation or representative to Missouri, to harness any opportunity that you may have. Now, you know that, and I will conclude over here because I already talked too much. You know that we rely a lot also on the JCRC's support or help or cooperation. And I do understand, and this is something that I understood quite from the first moment, that we as the Israeli representation have one way to look at things, a few ways, but somewhere that we are aiming at, and that doesn't necessarily sit or match the interest of the different communities around us, and that's okay. And I always said to all my counterparts here in Southern Florida, but also across the US, I will never ask either the JCRC, I will never ask AIPAC, I will never ask the AJC, I will never ask the president of the federation to do something that doesn't serve foreign farmers them. Okay, I'm all open for cooperation, for mutual support, but this support and cooperation needs to serve all interests. You or Brian or any other for that matter, serve their community, serve their goals, and I totally respect that. But there's still so much room to cooperate and to support each other. If you want later, I can say something about Surfside, but our activities in Surfside and the terrible disaster in Surfside just demonstrated how we could all join hands, the state of Israel and NGOs, Jewish, Israeli, non-Jewish, non-Israeli NGOs, work over here really for this sacred cause. So I'll stop over here and then maybe I'll continue further questions.
Thank you for all of that. And I just put a reminder in the chat, so if anyone has questions, please feel free to send them over. You covered so much, and one of the things that I'm just really struck by in all of the work that you do, you touched upon a little bit, but I want to dig in a little bit more, because you mentioned all of the political and economic relationships and all the ways that that's really crucial for the work that you do. I'm aware, I'll do a quick shout out because I know we have on here, I saw Don Rubin is on here for BioSTL, and Rich Wolkowitz, who also has done a lot of economic development between Israel and Missouri. And so we do have people in our Jewish community who are really committed to doing this work and to helping to support it, and using the connections that we have because of, maybe family that's there, or other ways that we've developed those relationships. But it's also interesting to me because you mentioned the trip that the governor is going to be going on. I know that Governor Parson had already done a trip to Israel with the Jewish Federation when he was a legislator. I was privileged to go with Governor Nixon to Israel when he first opened the trade desk between Israel and Missouri. So there's a lot of great things that are happening between the states. There's a lot of potential, as you said, for so much more. For those of us who are working in the Jewish community, but not necessarily in political or economic spheres, like what's the role of our Jewish community in helping to advance the work that you're doing? So I just want to really fine tune, because I appreciate what you're saying in terms of your support of the Jewish community and the work that we're doing to combat anti-Semitism, to support us and to support the Jewish community in times of crisis, just like what happened in Surfside. And then also, this economic and political, but is there a bridge between those also, or right? Is there a way that the Jewish community is helping you in advancing these political and economic relationships?
Well, I guess, thank you, Robert, for this question. It's really a good question, and I'm not sure I have a textbook answer, but I would say that, and probably has a few levels to this answer. First of all, it's important to acknowledge that sometimes we, and I'm talking about us as government official, bureaucrats sometimes, we do not need to touch anything. Some things work without us. I mean, when companies and when business people see the profit or see the merit in cooperating, because again, in the end of the day, it will yield them the either financial profit, scientific profit or revenues or gains, then these things sometimes happen without us, and not sometimes, many times, or maybe even usually, they work without us on the government level involvement. But I would say a few more things. First of all, you mentioned Don Rubin of BioSTL, with which we had a wonderful meeting, such an impressive organization in St. Louis. Really remind, well, I don't know if you know, but I'm a biologist in my education. I did my master's in immunology. It's really, my wife is a doctor for genetics, so it really brought me back to see their wonderful facility over there with all the equipment, and see the vision that they had, that really reminded me of what's going on with Israel, with the accelerator and the chief scientists and the incubators. Really a great vision. And again, they would probably do or have connection with Israel even without us. But being, again, you acknowledge Don Rubin, being such a warm and active Jew, of course, that gives Israel keeps, it takes a big chunk of his heart. And when the first thing he has in mind when he has a question, or his first go-to state or go-to organization would be Israel. And this is what I want you guys to know, that Israel has solutions almost any challenge that we face on our everyday life. Again, from health and medicine through financial and transportation and agriculture and water and cyber, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would hope that would happen, that if there is an opportunity, because we cannot, I mean, I don't know how many people we have now on this conversation. Okay, we have 22, I see. So you could be 22 or 20 representation of the Jewish state, and when you see an opportunity, when you see a tender, when you see a need, flag it out to us. Drop us an email, drop us a listen, Maor, we've heard that this and this is happening in this and this municipality, state level, military barracks, or anything else. And then I would say, maybe we have some added value to do over here. Maybe I could give a call to somebody at this place. Maybe I could hook them up with Israeli technology, with Israeli innovation, with Israeli companies, and you will be our boots on the ground, for that matter, in the wonderful state of Missouri. And of course, also when you want to practice your Judaism. I mean, I would be very, very pleased and happy to celebrate the Jewish holidays, to preserve the Jewish continuity with you, with the Jewish community. That means to come over and have Hanukkah candles, and to also have Independence Day, but also to mark these sad days of Holocaust Remembrance Days, and so on and so forth. And I will say one last thing about that. And you know, Rory, we've been in touch over Ben and Jerry's. Just for the sake of the example, I don't know if any of you has done that, but if all of us, all the Jews, would write letter to their congresspeople and say, this is unacceptable, we expect you to rise against such a shameful act of boycott and discrimination against the Jewish state, against the state of Israel, I'm sure eventually that this pressure would mount to and will not be ignored. This is, again, you will be a multiplier of our activities, of our force, of our operation, and the other way around, of course. I will, again, as I said, I avail myself to be to support your activities.
So you mentioned Congress, and to jump on, I'm getting a few different questions, so I'm going to combine them in different ways. But you know, there's a lot of talk within the United States about some of the shifting relationships between Israel and various political parties, and a lot of fear in terms of particularly coming from the more progressive end of the Democratic Party that's been anywhere from highly critical to openly hostile to Israel, right? We can decide how best to classify various different messages and conversations. But also I think where the Jewish community has really struggled with seeing strong alliances between Israel and I'm trying to say this in a non-overly partisan way, but frankly, I think, right, as America has become more partisan, Jews tend to vote more Democrat, but see more of an alliance between Israel and the Republican Party, but also Jews who are feeling really scared by some of what they're seeing happening in the Democratic Party with regards to Israel. And so some questions that are coming in terms of maybe to comment also broadly about, I think it's fascinating, right? We have not quite very new, but a relatively new government within America, but a relatively new government within Israel as well, and what that relationship is, but also the work that you're doing in terms of outreach to parts of the Democratic Party. And I'll say that with the caveat that I know that you and I connected very briefly in the midst of all the Chagim about needing to talk about some follow-up with Corey Bush. And now that the Chagim are over, we need to have that conversation and how we could support you. But you know, I guess to answer broadly in terms of some of the strategy that you have, and maybe also that, you know, it could be for you particularly, but maybe also for your colleagues, of how to maintain this relationship between Israel and the government within the United States, but also the ways in which I think the Jewish community is struggling as it aligns itself with a very partisan United States.
Hold on, let me just turn the light on so you can see me clearly, and I have more time to think diplomatically about this question. Just a second.
Fair enough. Just to put in a plug also, if anyone has other questions, please continue to put them into the chat. I'm trying to go through all of them as best I can, but please do keep them coming.
I'm back, just a second. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
I literally moved into my apartment just 2 days ago. I don't know where the lights are. So I turned many lights around me, but I'm not sure the correct light. Anyways, you hit the nail in the head with this question, and I'll tell you why in various ways. And I will again, I need all my diplomatic skills to dodge this question eloquently. But I'll tell you something. First of all, I reject the notion or the word shifting support or shifting trends in the American support to the State of Israel. The support of the State of Israel and the relationship with the State of Israel is strong, is solid, is stable. The support is overwhelming, and even in the height. And I know we are all talking about the latest example of the Iron Dome vote in the Congress. In the end of the day, it was proven that out of the, I don't know, 80, 90 members of the Congress who are considered to be part of the progressive side of the Democratic Party, we were left with, I think it was 9 voted no, but I think 8 of them were Democrats or 9 were Democrats. Anyways, and 2 were present. So we were left with, I don't know, I would say, let's say 10 out of 80 or 90. So these 10, we should not, of course, ignore that. We should not neglect that. But I think any state in the world, any country in the world would be very happy to get such an overwhelming support from any House of Representatives, certainly from the House of Representatives of the U.S. Of the United States of America. We just saw a day or 2 days before the very emotional battle between the Democrats and Republicans over issues that were not related to Israel, and the issue of the Iron Dome was taken hostage, was, I would even say, almost abused by these members of the Congress who knew that their party could not lose any votes. That means and that's why they use their excessive power in that setting. But given just only 1 day or 2 days later, Stanley Hoyer brought the vote against, or the resolution again, they were marginalized, and we were left with really the 8 or 9 or 10 that voted against. Now, out of this number, let's call it 10. If I'm not mistaken, it was 10. Out of this number, this is, even though most of them, 9 out of them, I think, are progressive, they are different. This is not a homogeneous group. There are some that, okay, I would say, some would say, not me, some would say that are derived from even anti-Semite motives. Some would say, okay, I've heard that accusation that, and antisemitism, maybe we'll dwell into that later, anti-Semitism, we have modern anti-Semitism, and you all know that. Anti-Semitism doesn't mean that we all are believed to have to be Jews with big noses and carrying bags of money. No, sometimes the notion that Jews are only good when they suffer, as Sarah Silverman just said, that Jews are the only Jewish state in the world, like Congressman Deutsch so eloquently said, is not allowed to protect itself, and being that it's a defensive system, this is almost outrageous. So being that the basic rights of the Jews in the Jewish state is deprived of them, or allegedly, according to these Congress people, to defend themselves, this may be considered as anti-Semitism. But others have other issues with Israel, or with financing a different country, and we have to work not only with these Congress people, we have to work with the communities that these Congress people are originated from. We need to work with the African Americans. We need to work with Christian leaders, with Hispanic leaders. We need to work with youth. We cannot sit in our ivory castle. We are the chosen people, and we are above the rest. No, we need to communicate. We need to share our wisdom and our wealth and our privileges with the others. When we fight anti-Semitism, we should also fight other forms of racism, other forms of xenophobia, other forms of discrimination. And this is what would bring, I hope, bring these communities, us with the Jewish communities together, and in the end of the day, bottom up, support these elected officials to eventually look at Israel in a good way. I hope I answered this question, but it does require a lot of work. Now, it's not secret, and again, that's what when I said you hit the nail on the head. I of course I know, even though you're trying to be very gentle, I know what you mean by Israel putting many of its eggs in the Republican basket, okay, or the basket of the Republican Party in the previous year. And this is not a secret, and this is, by the way, is not only the Republican Party, but we know also with the Jewish communities, we had issues with the Orthodox. We were very Orthodox oriented because the Orthodox are very powerful in Israel. So we all know we all read the news, we all know how the relationship between the previous Prime Minister Netanyahu with the Republican Party was. There is no need to hide it. It did get Israel many gains, and nobody will take the really great achievements when it comes to the Abraham Accords of the previous administration. But now we are in new times where we have a new government who is very oriented at bridging these gaps between Israel and the Democrats, between bridging gaps between the different streams of Judaism, and not only Orthodox, but also conservatives and reforms. And I hope that we will be able we will be successful.
So I would say, just to what you said earlier, I think you not only answered the question, but also did a really fabulous plug for the JCRC along the way, where I think that's a lot of the work that we do in terms of how to fight all forms of hate, and the recognition that when we stand together against racism and homophobia and Islamophobia and all other forms of hate, that we build these relationships and mobilize communities to stand against anti-Semitism as well. And certainly the ways in which anti-Zionism steps over the line at times to anti-Semitism and all of those conversations. So I appreciate that plug also, and just boosting that up as well. But then you mentioned the Abraham Accords, and I want to jump to that because we have some questions about that. I mean, that's just, we've done some programs on it, but it's so incredibly exciting. There's a lot of energy around it. I think I was just seeing today, there was some talk about, was it Oman maybe joining in, and other countries, right? Really, like, this is the the frontier of a whole new set of relationships across the Middle East. And I wonder if you could comment. I know that's not necessarily specific to, kind of the Missouri level, but, if you have anything just to share about some of what you're seeing happening there and maybe some of what we should be keeping an eye on in that regard.
Well, this is the Abraham Accords is I would even say it's more than just a dramatic change. And if somebody can say just a dramatic change, it is for and foremost a dramatic change in the reality of the Middle East. It was created, it was executed by people with vision, especially from the Arab world, I would say, because we were always happy and open to receive or to promote such relationship, but we've gotten to a point where the Arab leaders or these Arab leaders saw and that relates to the asset thing that I started my thing with, how Israel is an asset also for them, economic-wise, intelligence, military-wise, and that they gain more than they lose, and that it cannot be taken hostage anymore by the Palestinian question. They can, and this is what they announce, or this is what they declare. We are still committed to the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian question, and would like to see this solved, but at the same time, we see so much potential in the relationship with Israel, and that's the path that they've chosen. And it's not only they were right; it was proven very, very fast how influential they were from the inside, from within the relationship. Just for the sake of the example, during the last round of escalation with Gaza, the Guardian of the Wall in May. Was it 4 months ago, during which I spent 10 days in the bomb shelter with my 5 kids. That's an experience I would not recommend to anybody. There were, for years we've had rounds of escalation without having peace with the Palestinians, without having peace with these Arab countries, and they of course put pressure on us to stop or to withdraw or to whatever. And their words or they had no impact, no influence, because they were just another enemy or hostile country. But now from within, from having a relationship, from having a peace agreement, we heard them, we listened to them. The dialogue is much more intimate. The dialogue is much more direct, much more professional. And now when friends, when allies are talking to you, you listen. Listen, and their involvement contributed eventually to the de-escalation in this process. But I would say even something more dramatic. I think this is a change of perception. This is a change of paradigm. I'm not sure how to say this word. Paradigm, which led the region for the past 50 years, 55 years. That there will never be, since 67, the Khartoum summit, the 3 no's to normalization and to recognition of the state of Israel, that there will never be any recognition and normalization with Israel until the Palestinian issue, well, first of all, never, but certainly not until the issue of the Palestinian cause will be solved. And now it's almost shattered, not almost, shattered the Arab solidarity on this Palestinian issue, which is still a very contentious issue, don't get me wrong, and something that we are dealing with on an everyday manner. But the realization of the peace in the Middle East is something that was only a dream, and it came true just last year. And this peace was the level of the peace that we've achieved was so high, so fast. We've had peace with Egypt for 42 years now. We've had peace with Jordan 27 years, and since 1994. And these peace agreements with these countries is of strategic importance. I mean, I could not I'm not sure I have the right English to describe the importance of this peace agreement for the security of the state of Israel. But having said that, decades after this peace treaties have been signed, we don't have a normalization with these countries. And with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and soon I hope, and Morocco, and I hope we'll see more countries. Oman has been a candidate forever, so maybe it's Oman, but its name has been in the stock market forever. The peace with them, the normalization with them was so fast. We're talking about already $600 million of trade, dozens of thousands, tens of thousands of tourists are going back and forth. We have a great, huge, very impressive pavilion in the Dubai Expo. So really, the sky is the limit when we're talking about the potential between these countries. And I will just say one more thing. This is a wonderful economic opportunity also for people or business or company or politicians here in Missouri or in the States. The trilateral cooperation between a respected states, given, let's say, Missouri, Israel, and United Arab Emirates or Bahrain, it's enormous, and many, many things are already happening and will happen soon, including with the state of Missouri, when we're talking about this trilateral cooperation. So these things that you said are not really related to Missouri are related to Missouri, or will reach Missouri, I hope, sooner rather than later.
Well, hopefully we'll take good advantage of all of that. So to veer a little bit, I have another question here, kind of going back to, I guess, some of what we were talking about with some of the divide or the differences of opinion. So specifically also someone's noting that at least in America, where we have this very partisan nature within our government, that there seems to be this in terms of kind of, I don't want to say just taking sides, right? But in this debate about Israel and Palestine, something, very divisive between the Orthodox community and then more liberal communities, or specifically they mentioned the Reform community. And they're curious, like, if that's something that you notice also in other parts of the country. Like, is that an American phenomenon where we also have this very partisan divide within our government? Or do you also see this divide happening within the Jewish community in terms of its relationship to Israel in other communities as well?
I'm not sure I have that I've been here enough time to give you a concrete answer about that. I can say two things. First of all, from my experience here in the US, first of all, the support that the state of Israel gets is overwhelming in all streams of Judaism, of American Judaism. Again, here in the US, it's overwhelming. It's solid, and I don't see any difference or division when it comes to the support of Israel between any of the different streams in the relationship when it comes to support of the state of Israel. Now, Israel has its challenges when it comes to accepting or containing the different stream. Israel is still a country in which the Orthodox stream is very dominant, very influential, and I can probably say that the Judaism or the Orthodox Judaism, the religious Judaism in Israel is mostly Orthodox. Even those who are not really Orthodox, not Haredi, are Orthodox, and it's hard for them to see a woman who reads the Torah and wears a kippah, and this is almost a cultural thing, not a religious thing. It's a cultural. It's a perception. It's something that you it's very hard to see, and I'm very liberal, and it's still when I see it, it's strange, and I admit it, it's strange. I accept it and I love it. But still, this is something that you don't see. You don't see. I mean, you grow up and you don't see these things in Israel, and so in Israel, it's more of a cultural thing that we are yet to accept. We are yet to contain, and this government is committed to that. Especially my foreign minister, who will be coming to Washington next week. Is committed to cooperating with all streams of Judaism. But over here, I don't see the difference when it comes to the support of the state of Israel. I do think, or I do know, or I do hear, or I do see that there is a difference when it comes to the inter-American Jewish life. I read some reports, some of the Jewish federations of communities in southern Florida are collecting data, and they see that within Reform communities, they see more intermarriage of, I'm very careful to use this word because we're all human beings, but more mixed couples of Jews and non-Jews, something that you do not see among the Orthodox communities. And when you see these intermarriages or these mixed marriages, then it's okay if they're identical. It's okay if they choose whatever they want. Okay, I'm not prejudging, but the chances of the next generation being a bit further away from their Judaism is greater because it is dissolved. And then later on, we're talking about, we're not talking about, I'm a biologist in my education, so I know evolution. We're not measuring evolution in 10, 15, 50, 100 years. We're talking about millions of years. So it's the Jewish community. We're not talking about what's going to happen in 10 years. Then it's going to be fine. We're talking about people who have been in exile 2,000 years. We're talking about what's going to happen in 100 years or 150 years or 200 years. And that's the big question about whether the Jewish community is going to be bigger or smaller, or people are just getting away and then they don't even identify themselves as Jews, not as the religious part, as the cultural part of being a Jew. And it's still a very valid question, I think.
So we're approaching the end of our time, but I'm trying to get all the questions in. So I'm going to combine these two, and we'll end on an easy note, which is the peace process and the two-state solution. So we've got two questions that I think we can kind of push together here. But one is whether Israel sees President Biden as the visionary who's able to do this, right? Where in ways that the previous administration was willing to throw caution to the wind and unilaterally try to broker what seemed like a total stalemate between parties. And at the same time, maybe sort of the corollary to some of that is that Prime Minister Bennett said that he would not meet with Abbas, which he cited many good reasons for that. But does this stir up some distrust of Israel's intention and willingness to try to get towards a two-state solution?
Well, this question is or this issue, but is worth, I think, a different long seminar, webinar in person or through the web, because it's long, it's difficult, it's complicated, but I will try. You have many underlying questions, not only two that you maybe stated out, but many underlying questions. First of all, I would say is something that we probably all know, but if not, I will say it again. This government will not take any concrete step to promote the two-state solution. It's not able to do that. This is not what. This was not what was one of the foundation of this government. This government is a combination. Prime Minister Bennett called it an accident which became an opportunity. And we have left, even extreme left, and we have Arabs in this government, and we have parties that some would call extreme right, such as the Lieberman, finance minister, and of course, Prime Minister Bennett. We know that probably the main, the common denominator between the other parties was that they want to oust or to replace Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they were successful. But they have agreed not to promote any dramatic steps vis-a-vis the Palestinians, certainly not the two-state solution. That's for some of the parties. It's almost to say a curse. It's like Voldemort in Harry Potter. You do not say this expression. But, and I'll be very happy to share with you, I'll send it to you in the next few days. My foreign minister has laid down a plan how to promote the economic prosperity of the Palestinian people, to promote the quality of their livelihood. And this is something that we all want to see a rise in the quality of life of the Palestinians. Now, of course, the question of Gaza remains a very valid question. Who controls Gaza? What do you do with Gaza? How do you deal with 1.5 million or 2 million people that are being hostage, were taken hostage by Hamas and by Islamic Jihad? What do you do with that? Are you letting Abu Mazen and the PLO and the Fatah to run them, because they have no power over there? Now it's very easy to say. Many Europeans said that Israel were the one to reject the peace process or the negotiations. But we should not forget that Abu Mazen, even though he met with some of our politicians or members of members of the Israeli Knesset, is a lame duck. Okay, his support hasn't been proven. The support that he has hasn't been proven in I think 15 years or so since they were supposed to have elections. So we don't even know what kind of mandate does he have, and even if he has a mandate, we saw leaders of the Palestinians that were offered anything but the sky, and they rejected it. So who knows where it's going to be. Where it's going to be heading. Of course, President Biden is more balanced. He is more willing to take concrete steps for the Palestinians. But in the end of the day, we had many other presidents just as good to the Palestinians or forthcoming to the Palestinians, like President Biden. We had the President Obama, and we had President Clinton, and it was not the American president who was the problem in this negotiation. Okay, it wasn't President Trump. Many other presidents were failed in this. Hold on a second. My baby went away. And many other presidents were, or many other administrations, I would say, not president. Many other administrations. It's a very easy place to fail. So we should not blame nor the previous administration and not this administration if it's not successful. Of course, we should compliment them as we compliment the previous administration in their successes, and they had successes. But I'm not sure I have a really concrete answer as to what's going to happen with the Palestinians.
Well, we appreciate all of that and appreciate so much of your time. We're obviously also interrupting the time with your family. So let me just take this opportunity to thank you again. Just really appreciated your deep engagement with all of us. I think, living in the Midwest in the United States and having gone to Israel, where I know that a lot of Israelis have never heard of St. Louis, we really appreciate being able to strengthen these ties through the work that you're doing at the consulate, through you towards Israel itself. And you have a committed group of people here that are eager to stay involved and support you in your work and to continue this dialogue. I saw some nods, so maybe we'll take you up on that 3-hour seminar that I think you might have just offered to get more
I'll be
deeply
very
into all
happy,
of this.
really. Ronnie, first of all, thank you very much. And again, you know that I avail myself to you at any given moment. I also want to say 2 more things. First of all, to acknowledge my deputy who recently arrived to Miami, Deputy Consul General Mike Briggs, who is here in the conversation with us. He was the deputy ambassador in Costa Rica until recently, and he's a cadet from the time that I was the director of training. So his successes are my successes, and his failures are my failures. So with his help, we can of course do much more. And also, I'm going to be in St. Louis again in 3 weeks' time to meet the governor. And of course, I will be very happy to touch base and see if there's anything else, or to take up on this long due work meeting that we should start to follow the leads that we have.
Well, I look forward to it. We all look forward to welcoming you into to many years of good work together. So thank you very much. Thank your family for letting us steal you away this evening. And a thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Stay tuned. We'll continue to share more opportunities, both to connect with to the Consul General and to the work that he's doing, as well as to connect with Israel, broadly speaking. Thank you, and have a good night.
Have a nice evening. Bye. Thank you very much. Well, bye, Rory. We'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you.